I'm here with Thorsten and Ulrich. Hi guys, it feels like we were only chatting a little while ago. How are you both?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, all good, thank you very much.
And did you enjoy your first gig together this weekend?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a certain element of panic and fear and all those things if you do like a new project the first time. But I think we did our usual critical review afterwards, and we know where we want to improve things. We know which things we liked, and we probably want to enhance. So it's all good.
You have a brand new album, just the two of you. How did this come about?
So for the last 2 years, we're spending much time together. Maybe we're living together in one flat. Maybe half a year or 1 year in the last two years. So we always try something different. And it was after making the Stranger Things fun recording between two concerts. We just had fun recording some 80s inspired music just for 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks if including the mixing, and it was much fun. And we would just because we didn't had a band before Tangerine together, we were always try to progress in the working process together, because that's the idea to create music together, and not this is my part, that's your part, and that's my 5 songs, that's your 5 songs. Those this is a document of our learning process of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really tell the story in any different way. I mean, and how I perceive it is just, and I would say maybe that's a good example for what I was trying to say earlier on, that sometimes really good stuff comes out of a situation where you're just quite relaxed and don't even overthink stuff too much, because when we started working on those things, we certainly didn't have in mind to actually record an album together. So this happened like completely naturally and without any pressure. And maybe we didn't in the actual process. Maybe we didn't even take it so seriously. But that can be a really good thing, because then you relax and you just allow things to flow. And I think for me that's the one thing I like about this record. I think it sounds, in comparison to other stuff that I've done as far as my involvement is concerned, it sounds a lot less constructed or overthought. And I think probably I was almost a bit surprised how easily this happened for that reason.
Was that in some ways because each of you were sort of not trying to go too far one way or the other way, and therefore sort of trying to keep it or more balanced? Does that make sense?
Maybe more the other way around. I think we actually didn't have any restrictions whatsoever, and we totally didn't think about it too much at all. We just did it, So it's probably more the other way around, rather than very consciously trying to, this has to be exactly 50% Thorsten, 50% Ulrich. It actually happened naturally.
So was this in a way one of the most relaxing recording experiences you've had?
Oh yeah,
of recent?
Yeah, of course. Was it? Yeah, one of the most relaxed, one of the most quick, one of the quickest as well. I don't think I've ever done an album in 2.5 weeks or something.
Me neither. Yeah. So, and exactly what was not the thing. So Ulrich, you should do your shoegaze electronica thing, and he never said do your post-rock guitar thing, please. But so we just made the album without any very detailed plans how it should sound. Yeah, okay, it should sound like 8. It was the idea to the Stranger Things, but not exactly. So now is an M1 Korg in it, because it should be an 86 sounding album. This was not the idea.
It's getting rave reviews and it's nearly sold out in vinyl format. You also have a special 10-inch EP to accompany the album. And there's also videos, well, I think there's a couple of videos on YouTube. What's your take on this?
One video is made by Nat, which made even
That's the official video. Is
the
there
official,
more videos?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but there's one official video made by Nat who was doing the live visuals on Sunday, and the idea about the 10-inch was so we just recorded. Yeah, there was even that. So sorry, but it sounds like without the guy without plans or the guys without plans, but it was not intended to. So much as it just happened as all synthwaves and around synthwaves, the things happened and it worked.
Will you be hosting a website separate to Tangerine Dream for the two of you?
For this project?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't even thought about that. To be honest, is that a good idea?
Could be a good idea, but maybe the sorry for that, but the shoe names are very complicated. If it's called Quaeschning and Schnauss.com, it's very hard to get it. But maybe there's no plan, but maybe it could be a good idea to have a very simplified, clear homepage, just for some infos maybe.
But I've also mentioned here that I think fans on Sunday night were offered a real treat, especially with the amazing encore. I think I said earlier how organic I thought it sounded.
Yeah.
Where did that come from, and can you elaborate?
So maybe the best thing is to be honest. So so you were in the room where I unpatched my whole modular system for making the workshops. So this is how it sounds if you have 20 minutes to repatch all these things. I think was one oscillator was missing because I only had 20 minutes to set all the session instruments. So it was even that only happened.
Maybe it's also just because we had to play for a certain amount of time and we have only written 10 Quaeschning and Schnauss songs so far. So, and we actually enjoy these improvisations very much. So it just seemed another opportunity to ram that down people's throats.
but the fans are absolutely loving this.
Imagine it would be the other way around.
So the idea was, we recorded maybe 65 or 70 minutes of music for the album, and we the concepts should last 90 to 120 minutes, and there was several. We talked about what we were doing. So there was the option to play some solo stuff on Ulrich, maybe some picture player stuff, but so it wouldn't be Quaeschning Schnauss. So there was a good idea to play the album and the things that composed for the Synthwaves album, and then playing something together, because even this was Quaeschning with Schnauss or Schnauss Quaeschning.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, it's a brand new track, isn't it? And it will definitely be stored in a databank somewhere.
It's Monday today. The gig was yesterday.
Yeah.
It's completely off guard situation. We haven't thought about this at all whatsoever. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you invited me over here and to have fun and chat to you guys, and like you're right. I mean, I went back to the room last night and I started writing a few of these questions down. It was it just seemed like the natural thing to do. But I heard this organic track, something like I've never heard before, and I don't know. I can't explain it to people. You obviously have to be there to experience it. I think anyone who wasn't there, then it's like you missed something wonderful.
I think you could just gotta imagine that for us, we perceive this very differently. Because I mean, we do this quite a lot. We just get together and switch on the stuff and play.
So that's why I call it real-time composing more than improvisation.
Yeah.
For me, it's a difference between it. Only because it's maybe a little bit more focused on the music than. But for me, it's real-time composing. So maybe, yeah.
And as I say, I'm just perplexed.
But especially as now let's do the interview the other way around. Especially as a Tangerine Dream fan, I don't understand why you find that so perplexing or surprising. Because how do you think Edgar Chris and Hönig or Baumann or whoever it was at that point, how they did this stuff. I mean, they basically got on stage every night and played. I mean, and obviously that's what a lot of people do. So some people do it in a way where a lot of people like it. Some people do it in a way where only a few people like it. But generally, that's what musicians do. You know.
My take is that I think I was pretty naive, wet behind the ears. And when I was buying albums by Tangerine Dream at the time, I really thought they had been composed. It was something very like a modern day classic.
So you don't can do Alchemy of the Heart on the fly. You just so it's 6 minutes series, and the composing of it maybe it takes more than 6 minutes series. So that's. So there's a different approach on tracks. So lots of even the Quantum Gate tracks are all composed in a very classical way, like of composing. Not you can't do things like that, or just switching on and saying, okay, let's see what happens. So it's too detailed, too much changes for involving more people than one. So you there are changes that no one could expect it, even if you play together for years. So that's a difference. Yeah.
Maybe we should really just structure this. Maybe that's actually an interesting thing to talk about. So I mean, first, if you start at the core, there's a number of different ways how you can compose. You can sit down with a pen and a note sheet, and you can imagine something in your head and write it down. You can do that on a very emotional basis. You can do that on a very technical basis. You can do that in a very calculated way. You can do that in a very intuitive way. Then you can sit down with an instrument, and that kind of thing that I was trying to describe earlier on, where you just sort of try to get into almost like a trance-like state and let something happen through you. So many different ways, and obviously these different ways will determine the result to a degree as well. That's why the outcome, when we use this kind of technique, will sound very different to the way how we would work in other projects. So, I mean, when I do my solo stuff, for instance, I do this kind of thing that I described earlier, and I sit down at the piano and I find at some point like a set of chords that I find interesting, and I start imagining melodies and other layers, and that usually results in quite a long process. Then can take me about 3 weeks to finish just one track. But obviously this is very different what we did there yesterday, and then I think, maybe you can say how you write as well. Then we have even another way. How do you, when you do picture palette stuff, for instance? Then
just sitting down on computer or instruments, maybe guitar, even it's guitar.
And that can take ages as well. No? So that
yes,
can take
so because
really,
it's not linear.
Really,
so
really long process,
definitely. So I think to record this picture palette is a different approach from the idea, because most of it is film music and scores, so you have not the chance to improvise. If it would not serve the film, but would be horrible to say let's see what happened, but don't care where the next cut is.
Mind you, Picture Palace music to some degree, so I understand it's all making music to black and white films.
It was intended. The first 3 or 4 albums were doing silent movies like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, Faust, Metropolis, and then we got the invitation from classical festival in Poland in Midsummer. There was a album called Midsummer, and we just thought about what we're going to do at 9 p.m. 38 degrees. You can't do Nosferatu. Well, would be out of place. So that was the idea about doing the Midsummer, the first album that's not intended to be a score for a silent movie.
But would again, I'm talking off the top of my head here, but do you remember coming back to the old black and white films? They would have, and certainly the silent films, they used to have a band or an orchestra sort of at the front of this. I mean, do you think they were improvising, or again they'd already gone through the ramifications of doing a set piece prior?
There was score music, so people like Chaplin wrote music for their films, and they gave scores to the piano player. So we did some movies, so we played movie concerts, very pre-arranged and things where all things were intended to be at the place before. We never improvised to a side movie.
Just one more thing, maybe it's a bit easier for me to talk about these things also on the example of other people's work rather than your own. And I just thought, if you look at Tangerine in the 70s, actually, you can very easily see the different ways of making music, because if you listen to Fedra and Rubicon, I think, to me, I'm guessing a bit as well. To me, that sounds quite jammy stuff. And apparently, Jerome told me that once. Richard Branson even had like a catchphrase because he paid them to record at this Manor studio in England, and came in and said, like, make sure the tape is always running, because he wanted to make sure that any of those moments that appear when you improvise, these magic moments, if you're lucky, that none of them gets lost. And then if you listen to Ricochet, that's obviously like a completely different kind of thing, because that's loads of improvised stuff recorded, but then cut afterwards, so that it makes sense as a composition. So essentially, it's that's like a hybrid form between like a more brainy approach to writing music and the sort of more intuitive or impulsive thing of improvising. And then the next step is Stratosphere, where I think you can clearly hear that's when they started developing structures where you could argue it's almost quite poppy. Not in a derogatory way, but sort of it's got recognizable themes that occur and reoccur at very specific points, and it also requires that all three musicians must have known that thing is going to happen at that point, because otherwise it would turn into a huge mess. That's the scenario Thorsten was just describing. If you have certain kinds of music that you listen to, this can't be an improvisation, because there's no way that all 3, 5, whatever, how many people knew that at that point that specific change is going to come or something. Unless I think maybe jazz is a bit of an exception, because they have almost like a bit of a rule book that how so for the ones who are in the know, they can predict, okay, that's now going to happen, but like for people who are not clued up about these things, it's completely unpredictable. But yeah, I think those 3 records, maybe Fedra, Ricochet in the middle, and Stratosphere, they actually, that's quite a nice way of explaining the different kinds, different ways of writing music. I actually remember one funny thing as well that we also often talk about, which is almost a bit like, sometimes can be one of the frustrating aspects of knowing too much about music, because from our point of view, obviously we do have a bit of the feeling that there is like a hierarchy of compositional techniques. So probably also emotionally, because if you invest 3 or 4 weeks of your life in a very detailed and intricate manner writing a piece of music, for you that has somehow a higher value, also because of the work that you invested, than something where you just let it flow. And but obviously you can't deny that a lot of music that is clearly made on the spot and just improvised is a lot more popular than stuff that is very intricately written. And then sometimes that can even be a bit frustrating, if you worked 6 weeks on something that you consider to be your masterpiece, and then you have another track that you basically just did because you had, it's a boring afternoon and there was nothing else to do, and you just pulled that out of the head, and then people say, oh, that's a work of genius. But yeah, I guess this, you've got to live with that.
Maybe it's a little bit easier for us because we have roles inside the music, maybe like old school band. So someone is responsible for bass, and rhythms, melodies, and so that we share that that areas inside the music. No, yeah. So it's that's easier. So that's not two people trying to play the bass line at the same point.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, that's for a start.
Do you change over on that score?
Yes, sometimes, but I think not in polyphonic rhythms and basses. That is very clear.
Yeah.
He's doing well.
Maybe actually, I was just thinking that analogy that you drew beforehand with music and language, which I rejected a little bit. I have to admit, it actually comes in quite helpful with this, because it's very similar to language. Because you have people who are very great with language in the way that they do free speech. And you have people who are very great with language in the way that they sit down and carefully construct a novel or a poem or something like that. And it's very clear that's two completely different things, no?
Yeah.
And the same obviously goes for music as well. So I mean, improvising is like free speech, basically. That's one thing, and like doing like a picture palace track or a Ulrich Schnauss track is like writing a short story or something like that.
And I think it's because if you were improvising as a solo artist, I could kind of get that more than two people, but then you're both bouncing off each other. I gather that's what's occurring.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Two things are clear: the first note and the tempo.
Yeah.
And nothing else. So it was on Sunday. It was D minor and 88 BPM, beats per minute, and D because the door was crackling on D, and I found it funny.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was it.
Yeah, that's it.
I can also understand you being sort of aggravated. And as you say, afterwards, people are saying, "What a wonderful encore," and you've done your structured work.
Maybe it's not simple, like of course I wouldn't be so self-deprivating that I would say it doesn't require any skill. I mean, we're like I said, we're both 40, and we started making music almost both of us 30
Yeah, sorry, 6 years and Sorry, 6 years and maybe we don't know where.
Yeah, exactly. I think
I started with 4.
I got pianism when I was 7 or 6 or something. It was also kind of the same. Yeah. So that's 35 years combined, 70 years of experience. Hire us. Yeah.
I think it wouldn't work if we don't rehearse as much as we do. Yeah. So that's maybe. So just invest much time in rehearsing things together. Together, not everyone on his own, and then come to the stage rehearsing together.
I mean, there's definitely because of friendship.
Yeah, because it works as well. So of course. I mean, that's also. I couldn't do this with anybody just based on the criteria whether that person has 20, 30, whatever years of experience, because they may have ideas that are so different about where things should go that they're not compatible. We have different ideas as well, but for some reason they're compatible in this kind of framework. And that's just luck then. I've also worked with plenty of people where it didn't work. That's just but at the end of the day, I think it probably really helps if you compare it a bit to other things. You also have like improvisation theater and stuff like that, or what are these things? Slam poetry things, or freestyle rapping, or whatever. You
need a counterpart that not always counter but fits together. That's the thing. That's the thing. So it's very hard to find someone who plays the same instrument in the same genre, or at least the same genre, which play absolute different things. And it never happened to me before. So to find someone who, it fits, but he plays things I would have never played by my own.
I think that's actually, I've said this in other interviews before as well, but I think that's always a very interesting thing about this particular project, and it's probably therefore worth saying it again. I think this project for me personally is very interesting for the reason that it works because of a situation that 20 years ago, for instance, I think I would have been too stubborn or too immature to appreciate, which is it works because we are so different, you know. And when you're like a stubborn teenager, you think like, you know, I only want to work with people who have the same taste as me and the same ideas. And but when you get older, you actually realize that quite often interesting things come out of a situation that's precisely the opposite, which obviously, if you think about it in a neutral or less emotional way, which you obviously can't do as a teenager because of hormones and stuff, then you totally understand why as well. Because what is the attraction of a lot of music? I tried to say that before. It surprises you, it moves you, and that those things appear out of a situation in which things collide as well, like different things come together and a moment of surprise and appears and those types of things. And that's obviously a lot less likely to appear if you have two people in the room who have got exactly the same taste, exactly the same ideas, you know, and are probably even you get into this thing as well where it's quite incestuous, you know, where you like, yeah, great, and now we do this, and it's just by the rule book, you know, then nothing new comes in as well, you know, like obviously Thorsten quite often surprises me in the studio as well, and that wouldn't happen with someone who's completely on the same page, you know, which is then by now actually I'd find quite boring, you know.
So I mean, there's some second guessing going on as well, so it just stirs you up a little.
Yeah. But I think that goes for all working creative relationships. I think that's really. I mean, I'm not trying to portray this as a super isolated case. That's just simply the recipe for how the situation is when it works. You know, and I think that goes from really big musical relationships to very small ones across the board. That's usually the secret behind it.
So between the two of you, there are now many things happening. Thorsten, you're a member of Tangerine Dream and also Picture Palace Music. Where and how do you get the energy?
It sounds very maybe strange and very bad, but I'm enjoying working a lot. So I'm not take music as a must do. I should. It's Wednesday and I didn't play a note. It never happened. So I go to the studio nearly every day. Maybe not, but at least 6 days a week, and spending the whole day there. And sometimes it is time to do something different. So not every track is Tangerine Dream, and it's maybe it's clear thing from the first note on. So there's not going to happen. There's no song which I decide after which band is it. It's clear from first point. It's Picture Palace, Tangerine Dream, or something else. But yeah.
So you can dissect yourself in your various different groups. Is Picture Palace Music releasing any new material or touring soon?
We release next month, and we release a soundtrack called Cargo. I think end of July, but Invisible Hands Music. We have several albums recorded to that point. So I did another soundtrack for a road movie from someone who visited Tunisia, Egypt and Libya. It's called Letters from Libya. This is scheduled for end of 2018. If things happen like it were planned, we're gonna release the next normal album, which was a new normal studio album without a movie, in maybe April, May 2018. It's called Unpredictable Consequences.
And any tours scheduled at all?
We played a few times a year, maybe 10 10 to 12 times a year. It's not a real tour, a big tour, because I think when we are up to sometimes 12 people on stage, it's very hard to find dates for a big tour when everybody has the time on, and even the transport is sometimes.
So anyone who wants to see Picture Palace music, just check out your website.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's a new website planned for next month. So I knew the old it was programmed by myself in 2003, and maybe it looks like.
The same for you, Ulrich, a member of Tangerine Dream and a solo artist, sometimes collaborating with other artists.
Well, making music is the only thing that keeps me sane. I think otherwise I would have killed myself a long time ago. No, seriously, I'm not even exaggerating. I have to do this, Yeah, it's that simple. I don't consider it as work. With some exceptions, like sometimes there's stuff that gets on your nerves as well. And not every little bit of the process of making music is fun. I don't know, installing software that is difficult to install is not always fun, but actually making music is, I have to do that, yeah.
You've been channeled to just make music.
To be honest, it's not like a conscious decision. I always wanted to make music as well. My sister scanned some old photos 2 or 3 years ago and sent me those, and I didn't even know that. There's like one picture where apparently I'm like 1.5 years old or something, and I'm sitting like on a chair, like on 3 cushions, and sort of banging on the keys of my mother's piano. So it's always been like my main, or well, arguably only focus in life.
There's also a new solo album released this year, and are you also doing tours?
Yeah, there's another English tour in autumn, and I'm still hoping that there's going to be an American tour at some point. I'm discussing that with the agent at the moment, possibly spring 2018, but it's nothing confirmed yet.
And the album's going well, the new album?
To be honest with you, I had like the impression that I had a bit of a dip in the last, let's say, like the last 5-8 years, which I think is like classic scenario. Like you get like if you're lucky, you get a bit of a push at the beginning of your career, and then when you're not like the hottest news anymore, then there's a bit of a dip. And I kind of get the impression if you survive those years, which is tough. I have to admit that as well. So you have to adjust to that. Like if you're getting like lots of reviews for a number of years, and then all of a sudden there's a bit of a backlash, that's not easy to stomach for anybody. But I think if you make it through that, then I think there seems to be then a phase as well where it solidifies again, and you're obviously not like super exciting and new anymore, but you're more like considered like an established artist or whatever, and then it solidifies, and it looks like that last album has probably sort of started that phase a bit. It's definitely done better than the one before, and I'm obviously very grateful for that, no question, because obviously that's the funny thing with making music. These things, it's not just an ego thing, or actually for me it's not even primarily an ego thing, it's primarily an existential thing as well, because like my problem is really I haven't learned anything, I have no other formal education or whatever, so if the whole music thing fails, then it's over basically, and I don't want to. I hope I can avoid the scenario of me going to the job centre in Leighton Zone anytime soon.
I'm sure the whole world feels the same way. Did you feel there was any differences working on stage in partnership to working and performing in Tangerine Dream?
So Tangerine Dream includes at least Hoshiko, and which means a big difference in melodies and creating atmospheres like looped string layers, and I think it's different because the session after the main set, or the real-time composing after the main sets, is after the main set of the act. So you have a different mood after Tangerine Dream set than after playing the Synthwaves album. So it's completely different. And so the session after comes out of the feeling and the atmosphere in the room at this moment, and that's the reason it's totally different for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, it's that whole project is very different. In many ways, because it's the total opposite. I mean, the whole way how we described how we did that Quaeschning and Schnauss thing is obviously, almost embarrassingly thoughtless and intuitive. While with Tangerine Dream, it's very different because we know it's Tangerine Dream, and that's not a thing that we invented. It's a thing that other people have invented and developed to a degree where it's necessary, I think, to follow those developments as well, at least to a degree where it's recognizably in a certain tradition, So it's a much more conscious process, and I think we wouldn't sit down when we would work on Tangerine Dream material in such a carefree kind of way, like we would consider other criteria. I mean, in the very first place, obviously, the stuff that we discussed with Edgar for this quantum years period very, very carefully.
Now, this may also be a tricky question. Will there be a follow-up album? Will you definitely work together again on something?
We definitely will work together again on something, but
I guess it really depends. Maybe if there's like a trigger. I mean, like Thorsten said already, this Quaeschning and Schnauss thing came out of working on those Stranger Things related things, and who knows? Maybe a similar trigger is gonna appear again, and then.
And if, just because you mentioned earlier about your surnames being a little bit difficult to pronounce, would you potentially think of a band name, or would you just continue keeping with your surnames?
I mean, my problem with pseudonyms is always, so I did like drum and bass stuff in the 90s, right? And I had pseudonyms then, and I had always had the problem that at least 2 years after I was doing stuff under a particular pseudonym, I already thought I got sick of the pseudonym, and that's the only reason why I then in 2001 I did that first Ulrich Schnauss album, because I just thought, okay, that's your name, you can't really go wrong with that. So I'm always a bit cautious about pseudonyms, because usually I can never find something that I like for a long enough time that I can actually maintain the project.
Okay, so I'm probably going to ask a bit of a naughty question here. It may not be, but do you use your own instruments or Tangerine Dream instruments for your collaboration?
I always use my own instruments for everything I do. So, okay, but sometimes I'm in a studio in Austria for the Quantum Gate album, or for rehearsing for the Australian concert. So we use the instruments which are in the studio at this point. But for recording, so we recorded most of it, the Synthwaves album in Berlin. So we used my instruments. If we have recorded it in Ulrich's place in London, we would have used Ulrich's instruments. So. Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. I do have to admit that I used someone else's instruments on this record, and which are Thorsten's instruments indeed.
If people want to purchase this album, where would be the best link to buy it?
I would say support my very good friend Jonas' fantastic new record label Azure Vista, and go to the Azure Vista Bandcamp page, which leads you straight to the Quaeschning and Schnauss Bandcamp page that he set up specifically for this record, and buy it there.
And before I forget, another bonus for fans attending Berlin this weekend, an amazing 3-hour workshop. Who thought of this wonderful idea?
It was the idea of the museum. It was from Dr. Benedikt Brillmeier, who wrote it about Cembali, and we know him. We sat in a restaurant and talked about doing something, doing a concert and doing some workshops, and that was his idea. Dr. Brillmeier.
And do you think you may do some more workshops in the future?
Even this is not planned, but yeah, maybe not, but this is not planned for this year.
If you were to do workshops in the future, would that be a step towards creating a future initiative to young people?
I did have the opportunity once to do like a workshop which was quite similar to this one at some kind of sound school in Cornwall, and that was only for very young people, and that was actually really nice, very enjoyable. But that was particularly enjoyable because you could just tell that these kids, they were like, this was all like completely new to them, and they actually wanted to sort of then go out and make music as well.
Well, I think the people you were potentially looking at yesterday were a lot older than children. So and probably I was in attendance myself, and I think it was a sort of learning curve for us. But I think when you introduce that kind of thing to young people who are coming through and perhaps want to make a future in music,
I mean, I wouldn't overestimate our very limited powers, but sure, it would be great if you could give young people an extra bit of a motivation or something to do stuff, and hopefully stuff that blows us away. That's actually what I'm waiting for, because I'm waiting for like a next generation to come up with a music that I totally don't understand, that makes me feel like the old fart that I actually am. Because when I was 17 or 18, that's what we did, and I think that really should happen again. It's a disgrace that 17, 18-year-old people today are listening to. I said that to Thorsten. I remember that. I said that to Thorsten when we toured in Australia, and we were walking through that concert hall, and I said to him, "Look at these kids that they're listening to music and dancing to music that is invented by a 70-year-old and played partly by people who are 40. That wouldn't have happened in our time. So I would tell all kids, give us a good kick up the arse and do your own thing. Blow us away."
Okay, yeah. So maybe it's a good finish point, but maybe if we do more workshops, the idea could be to make it like a series of hours. So the thing of the workshops about to get the whole electronic music, how is music's gonna happen, what is the modular system is doing in 1 hour. It's was kind of an appetizer, which could be expanded to maybe 6 to 100 hours for the same people and not for different people the next hour.
Yeah, of course.
This would be, I think, an idea that could work, but nothing planned for the next 2 weeks.
Well, look, this has seriously been one of the best weekends of my life. I respect everything you do and your commitment to the music industry. I thank you for letting me hear your new music live and for taking the time out today to speak with me. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, thanks very much for having us.